how to lead by example, and what it truly means to be a rock. Carl is truly a legend, and I am so truly grateful that I have had the opportunity to learn from him, to work with him, and to coach with C. Reed. Carl has been a great teacher and a leader of young people for over 35 years. He has been a great mentor to myself and others at Dublin Kaufman High School. Being an AP teacher for many years, his students have produced some of the best scores on the AP U.S. government tests in the district and even statewide, and he is well respected among his peers at Kaufman. He has been a great asset to the culture at Kaufman. Carl is Kaufman. He teaches, coaches, mentors, and supports students and staff. He's the resident Dublin historian for both the district and the building. Carl is one of the most thoughtful, willing to do anything to help his fellow teachers both in and outside of the classroom. Carl's an amazing educator, colleague, sports fan, and friend to many. His dedication to all those around him, most importantly his wife and children, is unparalleled. His love of all things U.S. history and U.S. government has truly come to life for his students. As Carl prepares to retire at the end of the school year, he leaves behind a legacy of excellence in teaching, coaching, and advising. Carl has touched the lives of countless individuals in the classroom and beyond. As a former student in Carl's foreign policy class, I can say without a doubt he's one of the greatest teachers that I ever had. Carl Reed is an institution at Kaufman, a legacy, if you will. Without even trying, he makes you feel at home and puts you at ease. I remember meeting Carl during my first year teaching, which was 10 short years ago. I was nervous and excited, but mostly nervous. Carl made it a point to welcome me to the building as though I was a long-lost friend. Those are great comments from your colleagues. C. Reed, as you just heard, the Dublin Kaufman Shamrocks faculty and staff, thank you for your tireless effort in supporting our students and for being the best colleague an educator could ask for. It has truly been a privilege to work with you. Congratulations on your Golden Shamrock Award.
Thanks, Matt.
Yes.
Well, I'll be brief. In the summer of 1985, I took a job as a JV soccer coach at Dublin High School. Little did I know I would be spending the spring of 2023 as the JV tennis coach. In between those 38 years, my life revolved around the city of Dublin and Dublin Kaufman High School. By now, you know a little bit about my journey. As an educator, I dedicated my life to turning young people into good citizens. There's one over there. I like that one. As a coach, I tried to inspire athletes to get the most out of their talents they possessed. As a parent of a disabled child, our family tried to wipe out a horrible disease, spinal muscular atrophy. Our family founded the Miracle for Madison Foundation to fight SMA. Within a year, we changed our organization to a Miracle for Madison and Friends. Maddie was expected to die within a year or two. On February 4th, she turned 26. My amazing wife, Annette, has given her life to care for Madison. Excuse me. The students of Dublin Kaufman High School embraced the cause and helped us raise $1.4 million. More importantly, children with SMA can walk and run and dance, thanks to the drug therapies we helped develop. Andaline Biomedical Biosciences, right here in Dublin, stands as a tribute to all the friends of Madison. In closing, I've done my best to make Dublin Kaufman a great place to work and learn. I have tried to put students and faculty members ahead of myself. I know many have helped me to earn this award, thanks to each and every one who I have had the pleasure to interact with over the past 38 years. And as we say, once a rock, always a rock. Thank you.
moving on to presentations. Nothing on the agenda for this evening. Nobody has signed up for public participation. And board presidents, Board of Education comments, Board of Education committees. Anything that, I've got one item that I'll end up touching on in a second if Tiffany doesn't touch on it. Otherwise, does anybody have anything that they want to jump in with?
Yes. As the legislative delegate.
That was it?
Okay. So the OSBA legislative platform is basically voted on every year. Currently, they are accepting submissions for proposed changes to the platform, and we have until May 31st to do that. And I guess my question would be, would we like to discuss some changes that we could make here? I have some ideas, but I don't know if everyone has had a chance to read over it.
Excuse me, I had a chance to look over, I guess for members of the board and even Scott pulling out of past practice. I don't know that we've ever ended up issuing any recommendations, so you'll be at the tip of the spear with doing that. But if you want to jump in with whatever thoughts or comments, and then board members can provide feedback.
Yes, so in 2021, the OSBA added, well, the member delegates voted to add to the platform a racism and equity plank. And currently, if you read through that section, it's under student learning, I think is the section that it's in. If you read there, it only covers race in the equity plank and socioeconomic status. And one of the changes that I would like to make is for it to include all protected classes, so that it's in line with our policy here in Dublin City Schools.
When was the date to provide feedback again? I'm trying to
The
define
date
that.
to provide feedback is May 31st. So
Okay.
we would have to pass a resolution and email that resolution to the OSBA by
them.
May
Okay.
31st. So we could do that at the next
Theoretically,
meeting.
yeah, which is what I was,
Yes.
you exactly went where I was going to go with it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else besides that you had?
That's the only one that I saw anything, but if anyone has anything else, that's up to.
I guess I would say for fellow board members, if you have any comments, otherwise that we can round back, and then Lindsay and I with a gender review not this coming Thursday, but the following Thursday, can end up touching base and round back with board members.
Okay, and I have written the proposed changes that I would like to see, and I could send that to you if that would be helpful, and then you guys can decide how we proceed at the next meeting.
Mrs. De Silva, does OSBA have draft language that a board would consider when passing a resolution to amend the draft legislative platform?
No.
Okay.
I think we just follow, our current format for a resolution, the way that each district does it is the way that they send it.
Okay.
Any other reports out from committees?
Yeah, last week we had the last regular Business Advisory Council meeting of the year. We met here at Emerald Campus. We had a good discussion about goals for next year, laying out some goals and foundation work for next year, as well as a lively discussion about Dublin University, or Dublin U, and the plans for next year, and gathering input for ideas and sessions and format and whatnot there. So it was a very good discussion. We that took over most of the time, the Dublin University, or Dublin U. And then we also talked about the meeting schedule for next year and changing that up a little bit and trying to incorporate BAC into Dublin U as well. So more to come next year.
Anything additional? I know we have policy, our next policy committee is coming up as well, so obviously we'll report back on that appropriate time, and we'll have some other items as operations and finance continue to stay busy. All right, moving on to reports and action items from the superintendent's office.
Thank you. First, as Mr. Melody mentioned, we had our final regular BAC meeting. I would like to thank all of our engagement groups. We have 7 of them now that have met throughout the year. We have one more student advisory committee meeting and PTO presidents yet this week. It has been a transformational year when it comes to how these groups engage. And the level of trust among the groups and honesty between the groups and our administrators and the board members who were there. I think you have all got to see some pretty open, honest, and at sometimes emotional conversations, which is what we want from our engagement groups. So to all of the folks who are part of those groups, thank you. And to the members of the board who come and add to the conversation and get to engage with our public. I want to thank you all as well for all of those extra meetings that we have added to everybody's calendar. As we look, I have 4 topics here, and I'm going to start with Title IX regulations. Last week in our school district, we had some pretty real conversations with topics that, for good reason, engender a great deal of emotion from parents, students, and constituents in our community. Beginning with a early elementary student who is transitioning as a transgender student to our prom court at Jubilant Jerome High School, to sharing explanations with our community about an all-girls prom that took place on Saturday evening for our students for whom their faith may not permit them to be in a setting where young men and women are together at a dance. And while all of these conversations do engender great emotion, and there are many differing opinions in how we handle them, we handle each of those conversations from parents and constituents on a personal level. We, as a team, strive to provide honest feedback when people ask questions. I'd like to commend Mr. Aron, principal at Jerome High School, for the great deal of time and effort he put into providing a personal response to the members of our community who reached out to him with concerns. In conversation with 4 different law firms and multiple different lawyers, one thing's clear: we are obligated to follow all state and federal laws, and the state and federal laws on the decisions that we've made as a school district are pretty straightforward and cut and dry how we handle these situations. And each of us up here, either by oath or by contract, are obligated to follow those state and federal laws. We understand not everybody supports that decision, and I understand the frustration of some, and I understand the concerns that we have as we talk to our young, especially younger students, about some very personal issues that moms and dads may not want to have those conversations with their young people. I just want our community to know that we are mindful to the extent under the law to be age appropriate in our conversations with all students, to include mom and dad in all conversations related to these topics, and all means all, and partner with parents in these conversations, and to make sure that we are as intentional and purposeful in how we handle these situations as we can be. there any questions or comments from board members on the first topic on my report? Moving on to number 2, and I'm going to try not to take all of Mr. Andres' thunder with this conversation. Last week, we had the opportunity, in partnership with Ohio State and joined by State Superintendent Dr. Stephanie Siddons, to kick off our social worker cohort in partnership with the Ohio State College of Social Work. Thank you for Mrs. De Silva for attending that event. There have been some questions about the role of the school district and the role of hiring social workers and training teachers to be social workers. A couple things that I think we probably need to clarify. At the end of the program, these teachers will no longer be classroom teachers. Our goal is to have an additional full-time mental health licensed professional in every building. We would do that now, except they're not available. In October of this past year, the next to Nationwide Children's Hospital, the only other inpatient mental health provider, closed their doors. And when parents in our community call to make an appointment at Nationwide Children's Hospital for mental health services, unless their child is being pink slipped, it's 6 to 8 months for a parent to get in to service their children. And Mrs. O'Connor's here and she's been at our stack meetings when we've talked with our teachers. The single most raised topic by our teachers when it comes to what we need to do to improve our teaching and learning environment isn't PD, it isn't literacy programs, it isn't keeping politics out of our classrooms. The single most important issue is the well-being of our children and the behavior we are seeing from children in our schools. This past winter, I was at a round table with the governor, and there were 12 superintendents. And when asked what the #1 issue we see in our schools, unanimously it was the mental health issues and behavior of our young people. We can't teach our students if they're not in a position where they're able to learn. Having mental health professionals in our classroom is one of 2 things that we can do. Number 1, we have to work on prevention. Number 2, we have to look at our response to these behaviors. And the response to these behaviors, when we live our values that are for kids to take responsibility, is sometimes for the students not to be in the educational environment where they are now. We reverse evacuate classrooms on a weekly basis in this building, meaning one student's behavior is to such a level that for the safety of the other students, they have to leave that classroom. As we look at national statistics, which Chris I think will share more about, we know the number of our high school students who consider self-harm. We have an obligation to provide mental health services to our students and our families. Period, heart stop. And for those people who are critical about this, my prayer for you is it's never your child. Because we know that it could be any child who needs support and any family who needs support. And when it comes to the work that we're doing, I believe we have created a pilot that other districts will follow. And that wasn't our intent. Our intent was to solve a problem to provide services to our folks here in the Dublin City School District. And I'm excited about being able to provide that opportunity and having a solution that will allow us to better serve our students and families. Everything we do will be in partnership with families. We had a young student last week who was taken to Nationwide Children's Hospital from one of our elementary schools. Doctor puts together a plan. Follow-up is months down the road. How awesome will it be if we have a counselor at that end who can meet with mom and dad, who can get information from the doctor, who can then work with teachers with parents' permission to provide services for that child. It is our job. It is our responsibility. and that's what we're going to do in our school district. Any questions, comments?
I just have a comment. I just want to say thank you to you, Dr. Marshausen, and everyone who had a hand in bringing this Educator to Social Work program to life and thinking outside of the box to meet our students' needs. I think this will be so helpful and truly helping our district to meet the needs of our students and the whole student, you know, inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. So thank you, and thank you to the teachers who are stepping up to do this, because it's not a small thing to ask or a small thing to do. So thank you.
Lots of conversations about generative AI, artificial intelligence in our schools. Many of our teachers have been aware of what is available through ChatGPT. Now you have, when we look at Grammarly, there's Grammarly Go that can use to respond. You can use to respond to emails. It will generate your response right off the bat. And we haven't even got to Google launching Google Bard, which will take it to a whole nother level. As a school district, it's not something that we can say isn't coming. It's here. We have students who I am sure, and some of them here probably aren't going to admit it, have used ChatGPT to write papers, write essays, and they understand that if they use it, then put it in Grammarly, it'll sound like them, and it'll even get around the plagiarism filters. As a school district that's preparing students for future success, we have to have some pretty tough conversations about what are the foundational skills that we want all of our students to know? When are those skills being taught? And what is the role of the AI that's coming down the pike, and it's only going to get better? And what is that role, and how do we hold students accountable for the learning that we expect, understanding that they are going to use the tools and resources that are available to them? I don't have the answers to what this is going to look like moving forward, but we will be engaging as a learning community about what does this look like. There'll be some policy changes coming your way in the next policy committee meeting as Neola and the district looks at what are our policies related to generative AI. And we're going to have to dig pretty deep and understand that it's going to be constantly changing, because as fast as we get ahead on a policy, our students are going to be 2 steps ahead of what resources are available and what that looks like for them as they're creating and learning and getting ready for what's next. It's not just us. Colleges from PhD level with people writing dissertations to entry-level college courses are having the very same conversations about how does this affect what happens in our schools. I heard someone recently say, and I couldn't agree more, generative AI will be the most disruptive thing in our schools since our students started carrying iPhones and personal devices, because this is a game changer that we're going to have to figure out what we do. And as a district, you know, there are a lot of times we talk about our center lane. We can't say we're going to jump in our DeLorean and go back to a time where this wasn't part of what we dealt with in our world today, because we're not going back. We're not changing what technology is available. We also don't want to be on the bleeding edge and get so far ahead that we're changing standards and changing what our expectations are for our students. I think as a district, our goal is to be, where is the community and our world around us as we look at these tools that are coming, and how do we adapt and adjust to stay right at the pace that these new tools are part of what our children are going to need for their what's next, whether it's the workforce or college or any career field that they may be going into.
Okay, end of the year events and celebrations. It is literally party time. We've got 4 seniors here. We started on Thursday of last week with our military signing event. And I started talking to some of the seniors that are there, and it's kind of like game on for the next 4 weeks for those kids. Award celebrations, end of the year celebrations. We have field days starting this week in some of our elementaries. Because of when state testing fell, everybody who's taken a field trip to the Ohio History Museum or someplace else, they're starting to go now. So this is the time that every day as a superintendent, you wake up and you say your prayer for good weather, because there's something happening outside every day. And we're all leading up to that Sunday at the Schottenstein Center, where we're going to be able to hand diplomas to about 1,500 Dublin high school graduates from our 3 high schools. So we're excited about all of those end of the year celebrations and recognitions. And this is the fun part of what we get to do. I shared with the members of the board today, as we talk about TIF and funding issues, and thank you to Mrs. Gillis for attending a meeting with our friends up in Union County last week. I just happened to go look at what Jerome Grand had on their website. And Jerome Grand, which is about 300 plus apartment units on Highland Croy, front page, convenient resort living in Jerome Township that's part of the Dublin-Jerome School District. First of all, didn't know that was a place. Secondly, my understanding is when that was built, it was going to be built for 20-somethings and empty nesters and not target our school district. Oops. We educate 120 students out of Jerome Grand. Now, Jerome Grand was granted a 10-year, 75% TIF by the trustees at Jerome Township. And what does a 1075 TIF mean from the Jerome Township trustees? Well, it means that rather than the school district receiving $1.4 million per year, the school district receives 25% of that. So the school district receives from Jerome Grand $354,000 per year versus $1.4 million. The developer who developed Jerome Grand gets over $1 million each year from the TIF. And the developer gets over $1 million to pay tap fees, to put in infrastructure, to purchase easements, and to build roads. So not only are we getting 120 kids, the township has diverted that money to the developer to develop this to make it possible or more profitable. At the end of the 10-year TIF, the district will receive $3.5 million, and the developer will receive $10.6 million. And we educate 120 students right now out of that TIF. The figures were shared with us by our friends in Jerome Township, and Mr. Kern confirmed this morning that those figures are accurate. When we talk about TIFs and development, when we look at 1075s, we are literally taking money that's supposed to be used to educate kids and using it to build roads and infrastructure so we can have more housing. What does that do? It makes the next levy bigger. So for everyone in our school district, that $10 million over a 10-year period that's lost is the equivalent of 2 mills for a year when we look at our new evaluations. So that's money that we all have to pay. And people say, what can we do? Why can't you stop this? You can talk to your trustees. You can talk to your elected officials. Because when we put 1075 TIFs in place, you are literally taking money from the schools to give to developers and causing everyone else's taxes to go up so that we can sell and we can build more homes. Right now, when we're in conversations with Jerome Township and Union County about an
8,000-acre area that covers not only Dublin, but JA and Fairbanks schools as well. And we're going to be asked to consider, what do we do? Well, a non-school TIF, first of all, is something that we think would be a good idea, because we're going to get students when we build housing in the Dublin City schools. That's why people move here, is for the housing. And when we look at where that money goes, and we look at how areas are zoned, and if we want more multifamily units, that's what's going to come unless, as citizens, we talk to our elected officials. And at the same time we're looking at our northwest quadrant, we also continue to work with our friends from the city of Columbus on our eastern part of our boundaries, as I think every day for the past 5 days in the Columbus Dispatch, there have been articles about affordable housing and conversations about what does affordable housing look like in greater Columbus. And the one thing that has been missing from every article is how you fund schools. Because you can talk about incentives, you can talk about abatements, you can talk about how do you incentivize developers to build affordable housing, and the one thing that is just smack in the face missing is what's going to happen and how do we fund our schools? Because as local school districts, and it's not just a Dublin issue, it's a suburban Columbus issue, it just makes us go on the ballot more often, and it asks us to need larger levies. So we continue to tell our story. And some of the folks in the audience were at our last community conversation, and we often get asked, why don't you stop this? Well, we're powerless to stop this. But what isn't powerless is the people making these decisions are elected by our voters. And I think we need to be clear what their decisions do when it comes to how we are forced to operate in the funding decisions that we're asked to make as a school district. Go ahead. Questions, comments?
Anybody have questions about TIF stuff? I was going to come back to another item. All right. There being none, you provide excellent explanation on the background on the TIF situation and what's going on. One question that I meant to ask with item 1, because it's come up both in conversation with board members as well as members of the community, is right now we obviously, state and federal law provides us direction on what we need to do with the Title IX situation that we discussed. There are other states where that may be different pending state law and so forth. If there were to be a change outside of board policy, what would, and I'm asking a leading question, what would cause the possibility of that change?
Right now, we are under the jurisdiction of the 6th Circuit, and the 6th Circuit has made the decision when it comes to restroom use by transgender students and by gender identity and how that is handled in public schools. That case out of Highland Local Schools, just up I-71, kind of set that case. There was a case in a circuit court out of Atlanta that was a different decision, and a different circuit court has ruled that school districts may require students to use restrooms of the gender that's on their birth certificate. And there are several state legislatures that are considering state laws that would contradict the 6th Circuit's ruling. For us, being in the 6th Circuit, that's who guides our decisions under federal case law. In the event that someone challenges, such as another state's General Assembly passing a law, there's the opportunity that this would then get to the U.S. Supreme Court. And if this got to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court ruled, that would level the playing field. And typically what happens is when you have competing circuit court rulings, it will get elevated to the point where the Supreme Court will consider that case. As we've said, we follow federal and state guidelines. if a ruling were to come down that would amend or change what the current ruling is, one, we would follow the federal court ruling. If the Supreme Court were to change how something's handled, we would follow that, whether, again, it would be one of those conversations that some would feel more comfortable with a change, some would feel less comfortable with a change. We would follow the law as it applies. You would see policy changes coming your way as a board. And there are times, and I think right now up on Janet's whiteboard, there are like 13 or 14 policies that need to be amended. They need to be amended to fall in line with changing federal and state laws. Most of the work that gets to our policy committee is to align our policy with the federal and state laws. So, long answer short, Mr. Valentine, we would follow the law, we would amend our policy, and we would do whatever the courts directed us to do in that case.
Thank you. I thought it was just important for that to be shared outwardly with the community as well. Anything else?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to comment just on your last bullet point about good things that have been happening in the district, because I was able to go to the military commitment ceremony, and that was just a really great experience to be in the audience. We had a wonderful keynote speaker who gave a very inspirational message, and then there were mothers who, you know, they were teared up at the end of the ceremony, and I think it's, you know, I think they're anxious about what lies ahead, but I also just think that they were so appreciative of Dublin formally celebrating those who have committed to serve this country. So that was wonderful, and I just wanted to say thank you, especially to Tanya and Keyburn, because I thought they did a great job. That's it.
Thank you. And that speaker, Chad Jenkins, 97 grad from Kaufman, quarterbacked in the Army-Navy game, 4 tours of duties in Iraq as a Ranger, FBI special agent, has seen the world, the good and the bad, and his message about service, Mrs. Rigby was entirely correct, was spot on and very inspirational. And he's a parent in our community, and it's great to have him as part of our Dublin family.
Anything else? All right, we will move on to reports and action items from the Treasurer's Office.
Just a few things, and not as exciting as some of the other topics that have been discussed this evening, but we do have a couple things, normal things. We have an appropriation change due to a grant that was awarded. Youth to Youth is helping out one of our teen institutes, and teen institutes are kind of associated with drug prevention and leadership, so as to do some activities and different things with that grant. We have the approval of the April 30th financial report, and as we go, this is moving right in the perfect timing as we go for the next meeting, May 22nd. We'll have our 5-year forecast update. You'll see definitely on the expense side, we are in line with expenses as slightly under what estimated. We are over in revenues, which is a good thing, over our estimates, but yet it's still only approximately a little over almost 4%. So not too far off, but we'll make those changes as we come into the forecast in May here. So any questions on the financial report this evening with that? And then as we move over some donations, we do have from AEP to our robotics club, and Chapman PTO to Chapman Elementary for some logo mats in their commons area.
Questions or comments for Mr. Kern? All right.
Oh, one thing too, you'll see, and I don't know if Brian was going to talk about it. We do have on the agenda this evening replacement for Cheryl Mack, who will be starting at the end of the month. So Sue Everett is her name. So as a board, I know you guys know Cheryl for a very long time, and so we'll have a new name that we'll be dealing with from our office as administrative assistant. So we welcome and glad to have her.
It is recommended by the Treasurer that the Board of Education approve items 7B, 7C, and 7D. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Rigby. Questions, comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. We skipped somebody, and I think on that note, we've done that at least once or twice before since we started doing this. So I do think it's important when we have probably underneath Board President, Board of Education comments that we make item A, Board of Education Committee reporting out, but item B, we specifically put in there so that there's no longer any skippage going on. So with that said, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You're all good. We're used to it by now. But we're going to start off tonight with prom. So all 3 of the local high schools just had their prom a couple weekends ago. And I think it's safe to say we had all the local restaurants like fully booked out. It was really hard getting a dinner reservation, but anyways, we also were going to talk about the military commitment ceremony, as mentioned previously, but it was here at Emerald Campus, and it was really great to see all the 9 seniors who were honored and celebrated. And as mentioned, I think it's really important to do so, so that was really amazing. And getting a closer look at the high schools, Kaufman has been running some elections for National Honor Society and their student council, picking new leadership for next year, and Jerome's been doing the same with Model UN. Scioto's been busy with their student senate elections, as well as Purple Star Club, who hosted a Spirit Week to honor veterans and made care packages for military members overseas. They also had a baseball game to appreciate the veterans and are expecting to send 6 seniors out soon to DC with some veterans. And a few events to put on your calendars. So this upcoming Friday on May 12th, we have the district dodgeball event. I know the Superintendent's Advisory Council has been working very hard on this event, and it is a district event, so we'd love it if you guys could come by. It should be a great event, but yeah. We also have graduation coming up on May 28th, as Dr. Marsh hasn't mentioned, but all 3 high schools will be there at the shot, so please come by if you can. And we also have some senior awards coming up at the high schools this week and next week. And lastly, we just want to mention that if you guys want to take a closer look at some of the seniors and what they're doing after high school, all the home high schools do have Instagrams with Class of 2027, so you can see who's doing what, where, and when. But thank you.
Thank you.
We will have all of our student board reps at our next board meeting to thank them for their service. So they'll all be here on the 22nd. So we'll be able to thank them.
Moving on to reports from the Department of Academics and Student Learning.
Okay, on the agenda tonight is the first read of our 23-24 student handbooks. I'd like to commend Samantha Althouse and Mike Ulring for their work in reorganizing, revamping, and updating these handbooks. They hadn't been looked at with a lens to update them in quite some time. So there's not substantial content changes, but you will notice that some things moved around. I think past practice was if there was something that needed added, you just put it at the end. So we put things in a way that made sense and made sure that the elementary handbook and the middle and the high school handbook aligned better. I also want to thank Mrs. De Silva for her eagle eye. She caught some both minor mistakes and then some changes we need to make, and asked a question too about whether these will be available to our families with English not as a first language, and the answer to that is yes. So I'll give a little bit more detailed information about that at the second read. But thank you to Mrs. De Silva. The other thing on the agenda tonight for a resolution is our annual membership renewal with the OHSAA, which allows us to conduct our athletic activities in accordance with the Constitution, bylaws, resolutions, interpretations, and decisions of the Ohio High School Athletic Association. So that will be on for a vote at the end of the reports. And with that, I turn it over to Mrs. Marple.
Thank you. Tonight, under the HR agenda, you'll be asked to approve some summer stipends for our teachers in our Title I buildings. They tutor our students and provide additional support during the summer. And because of this, I thought it might be a good time tonight for me to share an overview of our Dublin City Schools Title I programming. According to the Ohio Department of Education, the purpose of Title I is to provide all children significant opportunity to receive a fair, equitable, and high-quality education, and to close educational achievement gaps. To achieve that, states must develop accountability systems to identify and support schools with academically struggling students, and local districts and schools must use their Title I funds to improve student outcomes, including academic achievement. So in Dublin, we use our Title I funding to provide early intervention in 5 of our elementary schools: Wright, Hopewell, Old Sawmill, Thomas, and Riverside. Our focus for services provided in these buildings is to go above and beyond what we provide through our general funding. One of the primary ways that we do that in Dublin is through our district math intervention programming. Our title buildings have math interventionists that focus primarily in the early grades, focused on early intervention in the area of mathematics and sometimes also reading. These teachers use our universal map screening data, and they combine that with diagnostic math assessment data to identify students who could benefit from additional instruction. Through this program, it's our goal to accelerate learning for students. This closes the achievement gap. Under the leadership of our department in teaching and learning and partnership with one of our teacher leaders, Kate Baker, our interventionists meet for regular PD. They receive training in order to consider individualized student data, set goals, and target focused intervention through intentionally planned instruction that aligns to the learning progressions of mathematics. The national average for a year's growth on the MAP math assessment is 11, what we call RIT points, 11 points. By January, so halfway through the year this year, our math intervention students in 1st and 2nd grade had already grown by 13.6 points and 10.5 points respectively. So in a half of a year, they were outpacing that year's growth. And that is how you close gaps, right? Double the growth, triple the growth. So we are looking forward to seeing our end-of-year data and reflecting as a team as we continue to adjust and monitor what we do with our students in those buildings and in those programs, focused both on growth and achievement of our students. Thank you.
Just one thing of note, we get $1.5 million a year in Title I fund.
That's exactly right. Thank you.
Good evening. So Dr. Marchezin only took a little thunder, but I'd like you to direct your attention to the screen. Here's the group that was here the other night, and I'll talk about this in just a second. I want to share just a few things about mental health. Since 1949, the United States has recognized May as Mental Health Awareness Month. Now, 1949 was a long time ago, and I personally don't have much experience in that. So as I was thinking about today, I thought, I think I know 2 experts. My parents are going to be happy to know that I mentioned them tonight, since they were both born in 1949. So since they were born then, I thought I would do a little Googling, come up with some stats about 1949. And I quizzed them tonight, the way I'm about to quiz Ms. Marple and Mr. Boney. Lori, do you know who the President of the United States was in 1949?
Harry Truman.
That's correct. Mr. Boney, I'm not a coffee drinker, but I know that you do love a good cup.
Mm-hmm.
How much did a cup of coffee cost in 1949?
About 27 cents.
That's also correct. It's almost as if we scripted this tonight. My dad said a nickel. He was way off. For 74 years, we've talked about mental health in May. And the bad part is, unfortunately, that after 74 years of education and advocacy and an attempt to break the stigma, we are still in what many call a mental health crisis in this country. So after learning a lot about 1949, I tried to find some of the most recent articles on kids and adolescents and mental health. And many of the ones that I found highlighted the link, a positive link between mental health and school safety. And given, in light of our circumstances across this country, I was pleasantly surprised to see that. Another great article dated just a few months ago from the American Psychological Association was all about kids' mental health. And it noted that persistent sadness and hopelessness, along with suicidal thoughts and behaviors in children, increased 40% in the 10 years leading up to the pandemic. And many of us believe it's gotten worse since then. And a stat that Dr. Marshausen mentioned, 190 Columbia suicide screeners is what our district has done on students. 32 of them have been given to kids in grades 1, 2, and 3. After discussing the why in this article and under the heading of building capacity in schools, the article stated, quote, "The biggest challenge facing mental health care providers right now, experts say, is a shortage of providers trained to meet the mounting needs of children and adolescents." And this program that you're looking at right now does exactly that. It addresses the biggest challenge. So last Tuesday, in this room, we had a very special open house. 25 of our best educators gathered here to officially begin their journey from educator to social worker. Over the past few months, we had 120 individuals across the district express interest. 100 of them came to an informational session to figure out if this was right for them. 45 ultimately applied, and these 25 were accepted. There's a lot more on this screen. Ohio State's up there, Dr. Marshausen's up there, Mr. Silva's up there, thank you. So it started off, Dr. Marshausen, he kicked us off with a welcome and some inspirational words for this cohort. Dr. David Jenkins, the Dean of the College of Social Work at OSU, and Dr. Stephanie Siddons, the Interim Superintendent at ODE, also shared their excitement. And they talked a lot about how they believe this is going to be a model for others across the state and the nation for years to come. Afterwards, these 25 individuals had an orientation here and then back across in the cafeteria area. They did team building exercises. They did icebreakers. They learned about what their coursework and everything is going to be, and had a chance to ask individual questions, as you would expect anybody who's getting ready to embark upon a career change would do. So this summer it begins for them. They're going to take 9 hours this summer and do 224 field practicum hours, many of which are at Life Sports here in Dublin or all across Central Ohio. Next year, they're going to take 12 hours of coursework in the fall, 12 more hours of coursework in the spring, all while doing their current Dublin City Schools job. So they're doubling up there. During the 24-25 school year, they'll take 12 more in the fall and 12 more in the spring while completing their practicum here in a Dublin City Schools building, which will be the first attempt to do what Dr. Marshausen mentioned, actually get in there and working with some of our students. And then for 25-26, we expect they will have completed their master's degree in social work, obtain their Ohio Department of Education social work license, and be able to meet the unique and complex needs of kids and adolescents today. We all play an important role in improving mental health for children and adolescents. I'm proud to be just a small piece of this program. I'm thankful to each of you for being a part of this, our supportive staff, our community, to Tyler, our Director of Student Wellbeing, and our partners at Ohio State, Dr. Dawn Anderson-Butcher and Dr. Sam Bates and their team. We have a research component to this as well, and so we hope to provide more updates to the board and to the community in the upcoming years as to the effectiveness and quality of this program. I'm happy to take any questions. None about 1949.
Always good humor towards the end of the meeting, Mr. Andres. Any questions? All right. There being none. Moving on to item 9, resolution authorizing continued membership in the Ohio High School Athletic Association. Questions? All right. It's recommended by the superintendent, the Board of Education approve the attached resolution authorizing continued membership in OHSAA for 2023-2024. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva, second by Mr. Melody. Questions, comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Report from the Department of Operations. Mr. Stark.
Good evening, everyone. I have 3 items for your review and approval tonight. The first one is we're recommending ES Architects. They go by the name of S, but they have an E in front of it, but that's what they tell me. But they're a new architect for us. As you know, we do a request for qualifications. We're very proud of the fact that we have a large stable of architects that we try out in the local area. And they'll be doing some general contracting work in our transportation area. It's going to be designing, later this year, we'll go for a public bid for this. The tent pole of the project, they'll be designing a wash bay by us, and they'll also be doing some structural work at our operations center and at the transportation area. And the transportation area and the wash bay is an idea by Brian Killian, who is up here tonight. And anytime I get a public chance to tell you how wonderful a coordinator Brian Killian is, I'd be amiss not to. He is the real deal, and we are so lucky and grateful to have him at the coordinator of transportation. And this wash bay idea of his and everything that he wants to do is actually going to give us an ROI back. As we keep those buses cleaner, they last longer, less repair, and it'll be a safer way to wash the buses. So this will be for the buses and a little bit of structural work. The next item is for a PI project for next year. This is the designer, and this is to, I put it in my weekly report, Sells Middle School, the electric infrastructure. There's nothing with more sex appeal than electric infrastructure at a middle school. But this is all the main boxes that when you walk in, when you know, to the electrical room. And as you can see, they're in disrepair. They were not only written up by our assessments, but they've been on our radar for quite a while. And so I didn't rehearse this. Mr. Boney, do you know what an architect would cost in 2023? No, we're asking for, again, Advanced Engineering Consultants was chosen from our request for qualifications. They're a very reputable engineering firm, and their basic proposal to do this is about $115,000. We estimate this project is going to be close to $1 million. This is a very, very complicated project to design. It's literally designing the electrical infrastructure for a building, the generator, the transformer, the whole piece. So that's what they'll be doing. And our last item that we'd like for approval is a little partnership with the City of Dublin. City of Dublin actually, as you know, supports the Memorial Tournament, and they fell short of a couple vans this year, and they asked us for use of vans, so we had to work with our insurance company to make sure it all works out. And we're doing this free of charge for the city as just a show of our partnership with them as we partner with them on this, and hopefully they'll be partnering with us on our new Riviera Elementary School, as we're going to be asking for quite a bit of civil work there as well. Any questions on any of those?
All right, there being none, it's recommended by the superintendent, the Board of Education approve items 11A, 11B, and 11C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes
Thank you.
5-0. Human Resources.
Good evening, Dr. Marchals and Mr. Kern, members of the board. Starting with our certified agenda tonight, you'll see an administrator resignation. Ms. Hunt-Stokey will be leaving Dublin City Schools at the end of the month, and we want to thank her for her work here and wish her the best. And as Mr. Kern said, you'll see a new hire on the agenda tonight, Sue Everett, who will replace Cheryl Mack in the Treasurer's Department. She currently works at Thomas Elementary, and she'll be working as the admin assistant in Brian's office. There's a resignation and retirement on for your approval tonight. Kathy Albert will be retiring as a social studies teacher from Carr Middle School. She has 33 years in Dublin City Schools, and we wish her the best. You'll see 7 teacher hires on tonight's agenda. Summer school programming is also on tonight, and then a request for a 6-period payment of classes that was omitted from an earlier agenda. There is a request for a leave of absence. Jessica Burry was selected as the administrative intern at Penny Elementary beginning next school year. There are just a few supplementals and pupil activity contracts on tonight, and these are all for athletics for next school year. Moving on to the classified agenda, you'll see 2 resignations and 2 retirements. Ann Martin will retire from Indian Run as a paraprofessional with 13 years in our district. And then Kathleen Thomas will retire from Chapman Elementary as a clinic aide with 24 years in Dublin. You'll see 4 new hires and then 6 salary changes on as well. And just like in the certified section, we have more summer school programming on tonight as we prepare for summer school and summer programming. And then the last part of the agenda are stipends. The first stipend is a revision to a previously approved DCS virtual course development request. It's just a correction in staff members who completed the work only. And as Lori talked about, the second stipend is to pay teachers for summer Title I work. The final one is the Dublin Scioto Freshman Mentor Program. This pays certified staff for planning, organizing, and implementing this work. And that concludes the HR portion tonight.
Any questions? There being none, it's recommended by the superintendent. The Board of Education approves items 13A, 13B, and 13C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Melody. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Reports from communications and community engagement.
Good evening. I am looking forward to highlighting a few wonderful things that have been happening in our learning community. First, you'll see on the slide the Service Learning Leaders Showcase from the See Kids Dream nonprofit organization. We had hundreds of 3rd through 5th grade students from 7 of our elementary schools that participated in this year's Service Learning Project. This program has been going on for 15 years, and it empowers youth with the skills, motivation, and confidence to make our world a better place. Over the years, students from Ohio schools have raised over $450,000 to support community needs in a variety of areas. This service learning program is important because it aims to develop critical thinking and decision making, creativity, leadership skills, problem solving, teamwork, really important things for success in our students' lives. The culminating experience that's shown in these images took place on Wednesday morning down at the Rife Center, and several individuals were invited down to get to hear from the students directly about their work and ask them questions to gauge their learning and the experience that they had. And our students were fantastic. They could articulate about their experience, what they did, why they did it, what they learned from it, advice they would give to future students, or if they got to do it all over again. And the thing that really struck me was they demonstrated our 3 core values so clearly. Just the responsibility that they took for their projects, the ownership, how they grew throughout the project, and the importance of their teammates. The students, whether they were in 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade, were able to share that, and it was a really powerful moment. I'm very proud of them. The next slide here is to highlight In-Demand Jobs Week. This was last week. This is an annual statewide celebration of the jobs, industries, and skills that are the most in demand in Ohio. And it includes employers and schools and community entities that spotlight these fast-growing, most needed careers. In our district, we had students from each of our middle schools and high schools who had the opportunity to participate in the Creators Wanted Tour at Honda of America Manufacturing. And this tour aimed at highlighting STEM pathways and allowing students to experience a wide range of career opportunities, especially in engineering and advanced manufacturing. It was a fantastic opportunity for our students to participate in hands-on activities with industry professionals and learn about the skills and education required for those pathways. Next, several people have mentioned already in this meeting about our military commitment ceremony, so I won't repeat what was said, but I do want to highlight that these 9 students that were at the ceremony and honored, we are so proud of them and their decision to commit to serve our country, whether they're enlisting or going to active duty or for future commission after graduating from a military academy. We were so fortunate to hear not only Chad Jenkins speak as mentioned, but we also had Colonel Bo Cunningham, who's a member of our teaching team here at Emerald Campus and the Aviation Academy. He is with the Ohio Air National Guard and leading a very high-profile cyber initiative in the state of Ohio. He was our Master of Ceremonies. We also got to hear Andrew Garner's Kaufman Choir perform. They were beautiful. They sang beautifully. And also a very special part of the ceremony was when Mrs. Rosansky was able to present challenge coins on behalf of the Nick Rosansky Memorial Foundation. So it was just a very powerful ceremony for all involved. Finally, I've got to bring up dodgeball because it is this Friday. I know it was mentioned, but I want to make sure everyone knows that this year we are also adding another layer. We are inviting everyone who comes to bring non-perishable food items. So things that are really essential and needed right now, things like toothbrushes and diapers, laundry detergent, shampoo, and also foods like soup and oatmeal, canned fruit, peanut butter, and mac and cheese. So you can bring those items to the event. We'll be collecting there. Tickets are available. They're $7. They're on our website. It increases to $10 the day of, so you might want to get those early. Participants who are playing don't need a ticket, and it is at Kauffman Stadium at 7 p.m. So we hope to see everyone there for a very special evening benefiting the Dublin Food Pantry. Thank you.
All right. Items for board discussion or future agenda items?
I just had one question. Last day of school, I see on the website for at least elementary school, it says 12:25 for the last day of school. I have heard that elementary schools, it will be varying anywhere between like 11:40 or 45 to 12:25. I was just looking for clarification on that, if that's true, and if it is true, how we're communicating that.
It's 12:25 for sure, because that's how the buses work, high school, middle, element. So it would be an impossibility for it to be anything other than 12:25.
All right, I didn't know if there was
Yeah.
busing challenges, and that's why if we're varying it or not, so it is misinformation, so I will
It's
communicate that back.
misinformation, but I will take this as an opportunity to clarify that information with all of our school leaders.
All right, thank you.
And you've got it on the bus end.
Jen's absolutely correct. The buses not going to be there any earlier.
All right, thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Rigby. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?